Incident response is an interesting subject, and it means a lot of different things to different people. As an incident response company, First Response focused mainly on cyber incidents. But over the years, we've developed a lightweight, agile, and administratively light incident response framework that we have used to work with various clients who have come to us when they've been involved in some kind of cyber incident. And typically that's a data loss event. So that's a cyber breach where an attacker has broken into the network and either exfiltrated data or stolen data out of the network and held them to ransom over it, or they may have just even encrypted the data in situ. Something we'll talk about maybe a little bit later is the threat landscape and how attacks differ. But for now, if we consider incident response, the way that different companies respond to incidents is also very, very different. I'm conscious of the fact that at First Response, we typically deal with companies that have not got an incident response plan or framework in place. And typically that's why they contact us when something goes bad, because they don't know what to do, and typically they're out of their depth. So what do we see very often during a cyber incident? What are the kind of common themes? Probably the biggest one is that companies don't communicate well, either internally or externally. Good comms is absolutely critical to deal with an incident of any sort, but it's especially important with cyber incidents. A lot of people think that, especially from the board level and the senior management team down, that, oh, it's just an IT problem. We just need IT to deal with it. But what happens in the event that you've got an insider who is disgruntled, has taken a copy of data and is maybe going to take that to a competitor? Or you've got an ex-employee who still has some kind of credential access into your network and has gone outside the company, is working for a competitor, or they're not happy and they've decided they're going to make an example of you for whatever reason. At this point, it's not just an IT problem anymore. Human resources need to be involved. Your legal team need to be involved. If it's a data breach, then you've got responsibilities within the UK at least, and certainly within the EU under GDPR, to inform the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, of any data breach event. You've got 72 hours from the moment that you learn of the data breach to at least inform them. And the ICO takes a particularly dim view of organisations that try to cover that up and not be transparent and disclose what's gone on. So obviously you've now discovered this data breach event, data has left the company, and the clock is ticking. You've got 72 hours to do something. What happens if you get a phone call from mainstream media or from a computer news website or a blog, like Bleeping Computer or The Register in the UK, and they say, hey, we heard that you guys have had a data breach event. We found some of your data on the dark web. Is your organisation prepared with a PR statement or something that you can put out into the media to say, yes, we're aware, we've seen it's happened, we've engaged with the company that's helping us remediate and understand, and we're dealing with the appropriate regulatory authorities? Most small companies, certainly in the UK, are completely out of their depth in dealing with these kinds of incidents. That's a very common theme that we see time and again. So, bad comms within the organisation. The best thing that you can do in preparing for an incident of any sort, and incidents are going to happen whether you've got the best tools and techniques and the best staff or not. Stuff happens. And you can't necessarily prepare or legislate for the stuff that is going to hit you from left field and blindside you. For example, there could be a hit and run accident outside your office, which your office CCTV captures. So how do you respond when a police officer turns up on Monday morning and says, hey, there was a fatal accident in front of your building, we want a copy of all your CCTV, please? That's part of an incident. It's not something that you were involved in or you're engaged in at all, but it impacts you, it impacts your data and your ability to respond. So communications. When any incident happens, there's a core group of people that need to be involved. And that's what we refer to as the core incident response team. That typically involves a member of the board, or at least the senior management team, and typically they'll come in as an observer. We don't necessarily want that particular person to be running or managing the incident. We'll want someone from legal, because they'll need to take a view on the company's legal position in response to this incident. And it may be the case that they need to have outside or external communications with the firm's legal solicitors, so that they can get additional advice if we're talking about an incident that they're not necessarily familiar with around the legislation or the regulatory requirements that are relevant. Facilities may need to be involved. So what's happening with the building? For example, with a data theft event, it may be the case that the attackers had physical access to your building, in which case you need to be looking at the data around card access systems. Typically that's maintained and monitored by facilities. If it's the case that you've got a gas leak or some other kind of event or incident that requires everybody to vacate or leave the building, or even just parts of the building, again, facilities are going to be directly involved. The point I'm trying to make here is the fact that something is never really siloed into an individual or particular department. So a cyber incident is never solely IT. There's always going to be an HR element, a legal element, a PR element, a senior management team element. And there are potentially other portions of the company that are going to be involved as well. So in a ransomware attack, in the event that your infrastructure is critically impinged and you don't have the ability to recover internally, you may be faced with the very unpleasant and unpalatable option of having to pay the ransom to get your data back. And we've worked with companies in the past that have had such a bad infrastructure, their backups were totally compromised, that they had no other option than to pay the ransom. Unfortunately, the attackers were completely uncompromising in their negotiation around the ransomware payment, and the amount of money that was being demanded was well beyond what the company was capable of paying, and that company closed their doors. After 135 years with 200 employees, that company no longer exists because of one ransomware attack. So people from finance may necessarily need to be involved as well. So core to managing the incident is to think calmly and carefully before an incident occurs about the various scenarios that you may encounter, that you may need to think about, and prepare some plans in order to respond. And the key is to keep things simple, especially if something occurs out of hours. And ransomware attacks typically do occur out of hours. Attackers will want to leverage the stability that they get of unaccessed systems over a long weekend, for example, like a bank holiday, where they'll attack the network on a Friday evening, and then now they've got all day Saturday, Sunday and Monday potentially to completely compromise the network. That completely reduces your ability as an organization to recover and remediate and get back on your feet.